Okay, so before we start this podcast, I have a quiz for you.
Okay.
On Jimmy Stewart. No looking at your computer. No cheating. What was his last film that he appeared in? Now, I'll say was in.
Because wasn't he in like An American Tail?
I should have known you would. I should have known you would get it. Yes, he was in his very last film.
But he was like in it as a person.
Yeah, he's a voiceover.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's an animated movie. You got it. 1991, An American Tail, Fievel Goes West. I didn't know that until I was kind of doing little bits and pieces of this, and of course you would know it. Dang it. All right. On to the show. The year was 1939, and Hollywood shimmered with a magic energy. I was a fresh-faced 20-something junior executive at MGM, drowning in scripts and desperately trying to stay afloat. Back then, stars were born, not made. Or at least that's what the suits upstairs believed. He waltzed into my office one afternoon, a gangly figure with a nervous twitch to his lip. He wasn't the cocksure Clark Gable type, more all-American grin and awkward charm.
Well, as a matter of fact, I like to do some talking.
He had just tested for a Western, and I, a lonely nobody, drew the short straw of running his session. He told me that James always felt too formal and just to call him Jimmy. He wasn't bad, nowhere near the charisma of a Spencer Tracy, but there was a genuine earnestness about him, a boyishness that resonated on screen. I wrote a glowing report highlighting his potential. My boss, a man fueled by cigars and cynicism, scoffed. Too skinny. Needs some polish. Fast forward a year, The Philadelphia Story was in pre-production. Hepburn was a lock, Cary Grant a given. But for the reporter role, a debate raged. My forgotten report resurfaced. Jimmy got the call. The buzz around him started subtly. A few stolen glances on set, whispers about his chemistry with Hepburn. Then came the premiere. Dressed in a rumpled suit, Jimmy seemed out of place amidst the towering egos, but as the film rolled, the theater erupted. His portrayal of the wisecracking reporter, a touch cynical yet ultimately decent, stole the show. The night of the Oscars arrived, I watched from the bleachers, heart pounding for the underdog I'd championed. When his name was called, a collective gasp went through the room. Jimmy, his face flushed with disbelief, navigated the stage with the same awkward charm I'd remembered from his test.
It gives me enormous pleasure to be able to present this trophy to you, Mr. Stewart, for the best acting in a picture for 1940. That picture was The Philadelphia Story.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a great thrill to me to receive this trophy, and especially to receive it from you.
In his acceptance speech, he stumbled a bit, his voice cracking with emotion, but instead of diminishing him, it made him more human, more relatable. The next morning, the headline screamed, Jimmy Stewart, America's New Hope. Years later, Jimmy became a Hollywood legend, but for me, his greatest performance wasn't on screen. It was the quiet confidence he exuded that Oscar night, a testament to the power of believing in the potential you see in someone, even when nobody else does. Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jenn.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights to our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there. Jenn, we're just going to jump right into it. You are a massive Jimmy Stewart fan. Your favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life. You watch it every year. You cry every time. And we've done a couple Jimmy Stewart videos. We've actually visited his hometown. We've made videos from there. We've made guides on kind of how to visit there. So we've covered him a fair amount on the channel. Now, if folks listening to this, they listen to our John Wayne podcast from last week, they'll know that you got the chance to go out to Los Angeles. Now, remind our listeners kind of what that was for.
So there is a nonprofit called Pin Up for Vets, And they have a calendar they do every year where all the women in the calendar, all the pinups, are veterans. And I was selected this year for the 2025 calendar. I'm the only Navy veteran. I'm going to be Miss October 2025 because that's the birth month of the United States Navy. And I got to fly out to California, to LA. We did the photo shoot in Manhattan Beach. I got to look like a pinup. They brought a 1947 Town and Country Chrysler in for me, the wood panels, the Woody, for my photo shoot. And it was just so amazing to be a part of it all and to get to be a part of this nonprofit. These calendars support veteran VA hospitals and veteran medical expenses. You'll see, if you follow me at all on social media, I will go to VA hospitals in the area and deliver these calendars as well, dressed as a pinup, and I will talk to veterans in the VA hospitals in that capacity as well. But it's just awesome that every woman in the calendar is a veteran, and it's a nonprofit to support veteran healthcare.
Yeah, so and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going to kind of be one of the Tennessee representatives for this nonprofit.
Yeah, so I'm a pinup ambassador, and I've also done some of that capacity when I went to Normandy in the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I dressed as a pinup, and I was a pinup ambassador there as well. But yes, I will be representative here in the Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas area.
I will leave a link in the show notes at pinup, I think it's pinupsforvets.com, that you can either pre-order the calendar, or depending on when you're listening to this, you can go to the site and you can order the calendar. So I'll make sure that I put that link in the show notes. While you were out there, it was Memorial Day weekend. We had some friends that you were able to stay with out there. So you had visited John Wayne's gravesite because you had a day. And this was like, you had to hit like the top of your list of, if you had one day in Los Angeles, this was one of the gravesites you were going to go visit. And that was Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, at Walk with History, you can always write us with historical stuff you're interested in. We make ongoing lists, especially geographically, of areas we're in case we ever get to visit. We have huge lists for California, and definitely based on time. And I only had one day. And for one day, there were just two huge stars, two huge influences in my life that I really wanted to see. John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. Unfortunately, they're not at the same cemetery. I thought they were. They are not. Their cemeteries are about an hour away from each other. One is 30 minutes north of LA. One is 30 minutes south of LA. So Mr. Stewart is the one who is north of LA. Now,
he is actually in a cemetery with lots of famous movie actors and actresses from all different eras. I mean, you called out a couple on the video, and that was like Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable. Obviously, you went to go specifically see Jimmy Stewart, but this was a cemetery that has quite a few folks in it.
So Forest Lawn Memorial Park has 6 cemeteries in the Southern California area. And because they have 6 cemeteries, they do have an immense number of celebrities. Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, just huge. We were just looking up the Nelsons, Ozzie Nelson, Harriet Nelson. Like, I think Matt Perry from Friends, he's just been buried in Forest Lawn. Like, it's just very famous. Even John Wayne's father and one of his sons is buried in Forest Lawn. So it's just one of those like celebrity graveyards. And because there's one of 6, Jimmy Stewart is in the Glendale one. And what's interesting about going there is as you pull in, they have basically a cemetery watch person or someone who greets you, and they give you a map. And then if you ask for a specific celebrity, they don't tell you about any celebrities. Even though that's why people are visiting their cemetery, more or less, that's not what they are allowed.
They don't promote that.
They don't promote that.
They don't kind of tout it as like a tourist.
They don't have a list of them on a map for you.
Interesting.
It's nothing like that. If you find all that stuff, it has to be kind of like aftermarket. And we show you in our video where Jimmy Stewart is. But they are there to talk about the history of Forest Lawn. There's a museum of Forest Lawn. Forest Lawn does have some amazing architecture buildings there. They do have some recreation, very Christian mementos like the Last Supper and the David and the Pieta. So they have some recreations of some very famous Christian sculptures, and they're beautiful, stained glass. And so that's the kind of things that they will give you information about and tell you where to go. So just some advice. If you're pulling into Forest Lawn and you're asking where Marilyn Monroe is, they will not tell you.
Yeah, so look it up on Find a Grave or something like that ahead of time. Now, Jimmy Stewart, you mentioned he was born and raised in Indiana, Pennsylvania. So we got to go there. Now, he got his start in movies pretty young as well, similar to John Wayne.
Yeah, so he started acting at Princeton. So it's so funny. We have John Wayne at USC. We have Jimmy Stewart at Princeton, like coast to coast, right? Princeton's in New Jersey. And so he's born and raised in Indiana, Pennsylvania. It's a small town in Pennsylvania, kind of like what I grew up in, just like your quintessential small Pennsylvania town, which is really reminiscent of It's a Wonderful Life.
It really does look like it. I'll link our video from there. If people are curious, it kind of what the downtown Indiana, PA looks, but it really does look like It's a Wonderful Life, like Bedford
Falls. It looks just like it. So I think it wasn't a stretch for him to play that character because it looked just like Indiana, Pennsylvania. So he's at Princeton, and after graduating, he began a career as a stage actor on Broadway. So he doesn't go far, goes up to New York.
I didn't know that.
Starts on Broadway, and he lands his first supporting role in The Murder Man, but he had a breakthrough in Frank Capra's You Can't Take It With You, 1938. Frank Capra. Don't forget that name, right? It's a Wonderful Life. And Frank Capra is going to give him a lot of different, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He gives him a lot of these jumpstart movies that really influence him. He's really good friends with Henry Fonda.
Oh, okay.
They're roommates. And then they decide to go out to California together. And that's when it's pretty early on. Like his breakthrough role in You Can't Take It With You is 1938. He makes a Philadelphia Story in 1940.
And that's what he won his Oscar for.
And he wins his Oscar. So if you see a Philadelphia Story, it's a very young Jimmy Stewart, Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant. And so it's kind of like this, you always hate these kind of movies, but no one's getting the full story from each other, and everyone's...
Can he play like a reporter or something?
Plays a reporter, exactly. And he wins an Oscar. And one of my favorite stories is like his parents call and we heard you won some award. You should probably send it home, and we'll put it in. His father owned the big hardware store in the small town, and he goes, we'll put it in the main window. And the Oscar stays in that window for like 40 years. So anybody who visited Indiana, PA could see Jimmy Stewart's Oscar in the front window of the hardware store.
Well, one of the things as we kind of transitioned to kind of his midlife that I found very interesting was the Academy. I looked this up. The Academy Awards for that year was in February of 1941.
Mm-hmm.
So not too many months later, Pearl Harbor happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jimmy Stewart is one of the, I think you mentioned in the video, he is one of the first actors in Hollywood to go and sign right up and join the war effort.
Yeah, he becomes the first major American movie star to enlist in the United States Army to fight in World War II. This is one of the reasons I love Jimmy Stewart so much. His family has deep military roots. And if you go to the museum, you're going to see a list of all his family members who, both of his grandfathers were in the Civil War. His father served in the Spanish-American War and World War I. And Jimmy Stewart believed it was his duty to serve his country. Before any movies, before any money or notoriety or anything with the movies, he believed his duty was to serve his country. And one of the reasons I love him so much, he was rejected in November of 1940 for being low weight.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So he, in February of 1941, so he's rejected in November 1940, goes home and eats a ton of pancakes, and he is accepted in February of 1941.
So that was, are you sure it's February of 1941?
Yeah, it's even before.
So it's even before.
Yeah, Pearl Harbor.
So that was like literally he had just won his Oscar.
Yes, he had literally just won the Oscar.
That's crazy.
And then as an experienced pilot, he reported for induction as a private in the Air Corps March 22nd, 1941. Soon to be 33 years old. He was over the age limit for aviation cadet training but he applied for the Air Corps commission as a college graduate and a licensed pilot.
Oh, so he had his private pilot's license.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And so he receives his commission as a second lieutenant on January 1st, 1942. So all these gears were in motion when Pearl Harbor happens.
Wow.
And he's commissioned a second lieutenant January, the next month after Pearl Harbor. Because again, we talked about age limits and stuff with John Wayne, because he's such a high age, the only way he was able to get those waivers is he already had a college degree, is what you need to be an officer, and he already had his pilot's license. Most men who are coming in to be pilots in the United States Navy have no flight time.
And he didn't have a family. Well,
no, he's not married at the time.
He wasn't married, and no injuries.
No injuries.
Right. And so that's so interesting, because there are Jimmy Stewart kind of like join the war effort videos, right? And you commented when we were making this video, you're like, oh, look, he's so young, he's still wearing butter bars, right? Yeah. And now so he's a second lieutenant. And so that was probably right when he was commissioned. And he even says in that video,
Now, it isn't as if it was a chore for me to talk to you, because I want to speak on my favorite subject, the Army Air Forces. I can't speak from long experience. I've only been in the service a year, but I've learned a lot about what the Air Forces have to offer. That's what I want to talk to you about.
So he's making a promotional video as kind of part of his early service, because he's so well known, because he had just won an Oscar like a year ago, and makes this video kind of, again, war propaganda, the good kind, getting the word out. And then he goes on to continue to serve, I think, flying B-24s or something.
B-24s. So the issue was he's still under contract with MGM. So after enlisting, he made no commercial films, but he's still under contract with MGM. MGM limits his public appearances to doing these war effort films, because MGM is still, Frank Capra and Ford, they're still trying to make films during the time. And so it's called Winning Your Wings, and it's to help to recruit airmen. That's what you see him in. And that was nominated for Academy Award for Best Documentary in 1942.
Oh, really?
And it appeared in movie theaters nationwide. It actually, they say it recruited about over 150,000 new recruits, just that video alone. And he was very concerned that his celebrity status would regulate him to duties behind enemy lines, which is happened to people like Clark Gable and things like that. Like, they didn't put them on the front because they're celebrity, and if something would have happened to them, it could be terrible.
Sure.
Which did happen. Glenn Miller.
That's right.
And the actor, I always forget his name, but he was Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
He was a pilot, and he was lost over the English Channel, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
So,
but that didn't happen to Jimmy Stewart.
Did not happen, but he pushed his commander to let him go to England. And in November of 1943, they did. And so as he was part of the 703rd Bomb Squadron, and he flew the B-24 Liberator, like you said before. And he was promoted to major in Germany in 1944, and he was awarded the Distinguished Cross for actions taken as with the 2nd Bombardment Wing. He won an air medal with 3 oak leaf clusters as well.
Can you imagine being like an air crew on his aircraft and hearing his voice? Hello there. I can't do a Jimmy Stewart impression, but imagine hearing him calling what he's doing and how he's flying. That must have just been. I would love to hear a secondhand account from somebody that was his air crew about how he was as a pilot, as an officer, because he's always embodied that personality of service. When he eventually got married, he was married for a very long time and stayed with her. And he was very that whole kind of all-American persona. And as we'll kind of talk a little bit more about, he ends up after the war staying in. The world was a different place. In 1943, Hollywood was no longer a carefree bubble. Now I found myself working for the OSS Field Photographic Branch, a far cry from greenlighting scripts. John Ford, the gruff director we all knew, was now our unlikely leader, overseeing a team capturing vital events on film. One day, a familiar name popped up on a briefing sheet, James Stewart. My heart lurched. Jimmy? America's sweetheart had become one of the first Hollywood actors to enlist in the Army Air Corps. He was flying B-24s over Europe, a stark contrast to the staged dogfights he'd once filmed. A pang of guilt washed over me, safe in my dimly lit office amidst a mountain of photographs, while Jimmy faced unimaginable danger. John Ford, ever perceptive, noticed my reaction. "Know him?" he rumbled, his voice betraying a flicker of respect. I poured him a cup of coffee, the memory of Jimmy's earnest face a stark contrast to the grim realities of war on our desks. He tested for a Western at MGM years ago, I confessed. One of my first reports ever. Ford grunted, the closest he ever got to a smile. Good head on his shoulders, that one. They say he's a damn good pilot, too. Every successful bombing run photograph we received felt like a personal victory. Every downed bomber a punch to the gut. Jimmy's youthful confidence on screen had morphed into a different kind of heroism, one far more dangerous. The war ended, a bittersweet victory. Hollywood started churning out war films again, but they felt hollow compared to the real stories we documented. Jimmy returned a decorated hero, the boyish charm tempered by the weight of his experience. He continued to shine on screen, but for me, he would always be more than a movie star. He was a reminder of the courage that lies beneath an easy smile, a testament to the war fought, not just on the silver screens, but in the vast expanse of the sky.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town.
And so if you visit Jimmy Stewart's hometown like we did in Indiana, and you have to make this hike up to his house called Vinegar Hill, halfway up they have a plaque that commemorates his service and talks about all of the war missions he flew. And it's well into the 20s. He did 24 war missions, like over enemy lines. And like I said, he's promoted to full colonel in March of 1945. So he's one of the few people who rises from private to colonel in only 4 years. And like you said, if you asked anybody who served with him, it's my understanding he was just a very humble guy, but did his job and did it well.
Yeah.
He didn't want any favoritism. He didn't want any special treatment. He wanted to do the job just like everybody else. And he didn't want people to think he was getting any favoritism because of his celebrity status. So he wasn't good at what he did. So he made sure he did everything everybody else had to do. And like you said, he doesn't get out of the service when the war is over. He actually will stay in. And
now he stays in as a reservist.
As a reservist. But because of that, he will become the highest ranking actor in the military of all time. He becomes a brigadier general.
Now, we do get a lot of comments, and these are people who just kind of don't realize how the military structure works. Some people will jump in and say, well, what about Ronald Reagan? Like, he was the commander-in-chief. I was like, okay, fair point. However, the president, the commander-in-chief, is not technically in the military. They are still a civilian. They don't swear an oath into office. They don't do any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So while they are overall in charge of the military as the head of the government, the president is not technically in the military. Mm-hmm. So there has never been another higher ranking kind of Hollywood actor than Jimmy Stewart, because he finished his time as, I think, a 1-star.
Yes.
And people will say, well, what about John Ford? John Ford, I mean, he finished as a Navy captain.
He does, but
right? There's lots of folks that finish as 06s, but Jimmy Stewart is the highest ranking of all time.
Yeah, he has a star.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that John Ford, it's not real military service when you're making propaganda movies or when you're making movies, but Jimmy Stewart is operating in a combat role. So he's actually a pilot in the United States.
Yeah, and I do believe some people will bring up John Ford because he finished as an 05 or an 06 and was eventually awarded kind of like an honorary rank of Rear Admiral in the Navy, but that was honorary. He never actually held the rank while he was commissioned in military service. So people will, I think, point him out as well.
Yes, yes. So what I love about Jimmy Stewart, and again, we cover this with our videos from his hometown, his first movie, after he comes back from the war is It's a Wonderful Life.
And I didn't realize that. And that kind of gives that movie, now that I know that, a little bit more weight. And you kind of talk about why.
Yeah. So if you watch It's a Wonderful Life, first of all, Jimmy Stewart didn't know if he would be accepted back into the movies. He didn't know if he still had it. He'd been gone for a while and hadn't made any movies, so he was kind of nervous about it. So it's Frank Capra who kind of gave him his start and
let him back in.
Frank Capra also has just served in the war, and so that's why It's a Wonderful Life kind of has a war undertone to it. But Jimmy Stewart's character is not a service member. Jimmy Stewart's character is a support, someone who stays home, someone who never gets to serve, someone who never gets the glory of combat or surviving combat or coming home to victory. His brother does. So every bit who his brother is in It's a Wonderful Life is actually who Jimmy Stewart actually was. But Jimmy Stewart plays the character of the brother who stays home and supports everybody else and keeps everything safe and normal back home in America. And I really appreciate that so much because that he didn't have to play that part. That really wasn't who he was. He was the other guy, but he wanted to show, and I appreciate this, the appreciation for everybody who stays back home and supports you.
Well, and I think you call out in the video that I loved was that the hero of this movie was the person who stayed home, was the person who was a 4F, was the person that didn't get to follow what they thought their dreams were, but they supported everybody else's dreams. They were there lifting everybody else up through the effort, through this little town, and made everything better by being that person who stayed home, by being that foundation, even though they didn't get to follow their dreams. And you call it out at the end when his brother gives him the toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town. And that is Jimmy Stewart, kind of that nod to everybody else in the war effort that stayed home, that didn't get the quote unquote glory of going to war and coming back. And so when you pointed that out in the video, I just absolutely loved that perspective of this movie that is such an all-time classic, that is It's a Wonderful Life, your favorite movie of all time. So I thought you did a great job pointing that out in the video, right? And I cut over some It's a Wonderful Life kind of video footage and stuff like that. So I encourage people to watch it after this. But it was so neat that was his first movie back, coming back from the war, coming back from all this, and he makes this just instant ultra classic, and then continues on from there.
Sure, and I think it's another testament to how humble he is. He's not looking to get that accolade. He's looking to thank everybody else for what they did during that time. And he also had some PTSD, and he felt like maybe making this movie would help him to process it, because it is a look back at World War II, and it really did help him kind of process that PTSD and understand all the loss of life of World War II, but understand what we were fighting for. And when you go on with your life and you try to live a wonderful life, you do it in memory of all of those that gave up their life for you to do that. And I think that was another reason why he wanted to make this film.
Yeah. Now, obviously, making It's a Wonderful Life was a big success for him, and I don't know if it was instantly successful kind of at the time. I'm sure it was well received, but he continues on, and he has an incredibly successful career in life after that.
Sure. Well, It's a Wonderful Life at the time wasn't well received, right? It's a Wonderful Life at the time was mediocre. Now it has grown into infamy. Now it's become a classic and everybody loves it. But at the time it was
It's a Christmas movie.
But he made like Harvey in 1947, and that was like...
And he got nominated for that.
Huge. And we watch Harvey. His acting is just amazing.
I've said this before in a podcast about him, and I included the clip in the video. It's some of the best acting. I was just so surprised when I watched certain scenes in this movie. that I can 100% see why he was nominated for Best Actor. And he was actually nominated multiple times for multiple movies.
Oh, yeah. And he's going to go on to work with the great himself, Alfred Hitchcock. He does a couple movies with Alfred Hitchcock. He'll do Rope, he'll do Vertigo, and he'll do the movie that's connected to our family, Rear Window. And Rear Window is amazing. Anyone who can act from a wheelchair, a whole movie, I mean, this is a testimony to how great of an actor he is.
Yeah, and if you guys are curious about our tie, we won't go too deep into it. But again, my grandfather was a Hollywood prop master and actually worked as a prop master on Rear Window. And he has a picture, we have the picture of him setting essentially the back lot stage for the movie. So you see, if you've ever seen Rear Window, if you haven't, it stands up very, very well. It's still very good even today. It's Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly. They kind of are watching the neighbors and this murder that happens and all this drama, right? But there's the whole setting. And if you've seen it before, picture that Rear Window, that kind of courtyard setting, but they have the labels. And my grandfather must have probably had them there or had a picture of the labels of each of the characters at each of their spots across the courtyard. And so we have that picture, and that's never shown in the movie.
Nope.
That is a true family heirloom.
Yeah.
And so it's really neat. So I actually show some video of that. If you guys are curious, I'll link this Jimmy Stewart. So I took some video of this picture we have in our house of that backlot with the labels for the different characters in that movie.
And that movie came out in 1954. It's the 8th highest grossing film of 1954. And what else happened is he replaces, in Look magazine, they do the most popular movie stars of all time. In 1954, Jimmy Stewart will replace John Wayne.
No way.
As the top movie star.
Oh my gosh.
I know. So 1954 is big for him. Rear Window and replacing John Wayne. The thing about Jimmy Stewart is he's still bankable. And he gets more bankable just as his career goes on. He's just one of those stars that just grows. And it doesn't matter. He's not really typecasted. He does Westerns. He does suspense films. He does family films. He can really just be very versatile. I mean, he's playing Alfred Hitchcock. He's doing family films. He's doing Westerns. He's playing Billy. He's playing Lindbergh in The Spirit of St. Louis. He's playing Glenn Miller.
Yeah, I mean, and he's tied to John Wayne not only from 1954, but he's in John Wayne's last movie, The Shootist, which, again, they're both kind of in the twilights of their careers. Obviously, for John Wayne, that was his last movie, but Jimmy Stewart, that was one of his last, not his very last. But he plays this doctor giving John Wayne's character, this rough and tough sheriff, the bad news that essentially John Wayne's character, I don't remember his name, has cancer, has terminal cancer.
Yeah, so they were together in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
That's right.
And that's a John Ford movie shot in black and white to make them both look younger because they were kind of...
Which is a phenomenal movie.
Phenomenal, older at the time. So I think The Shootist is reminiscent of them coming back together in a Western. Jimmy Stewart at the time had some hearing problems, couldn't quite get the cues right on movies anymore. And John Wayne said, "Don't worry, I got you." So together, John Wayne would help give him the cue to say his
He would
line.
Stomp his foot real loud or something like that.
Do something, flick his face, do something. So Jimmy Stewart knew when to deliver the line and stuff. So it just was a comfort level. You're going to see that with Jimmy Stewart. He's a people person, right? And he is just really feels comfortable with certain people. We talked about his marriage to Gloria. He marries Gloria, I think, let me make sure I have the date right here. He marries Gloria in 1949, and together they'll have 2 daughters. He'll adopt her 2 sons from a previous marriage. And he's with her until her death in 1994. Now, he lives for 3 more years, but he becomes kind of reclusive after this because of the comfort level. He doesn't feel comfortable with anybody else really after her. He wants to see his children, but that's about it. And it comes to a point where he has a pacemaker and he doesn't get the battery replaced. He wants to be with Gloria. Those are his final words. I want to go be with Gloria now. And he's just a family man. He is one of those people that he not only shows you what it's like to be a person of good character, he's living the life of a man of good character. And that's one of the reasons I love Jimmy Stewart so much, to be able to there was no flag at his grave for Memorial Day. So to be able to be the one to leave a flag at Brigadier General James Maitland Stewart's grave was an honor for me. And then his adopted son, who is killed in Vietnam, who Memorial Day is all about, also did not have a flag. He's buried beside his mother, who's Jimmy Stewart's wife. I left a flag at his grave as well. That was such an honor for me. So my Memorial Day for me was perfect because I got to honor somebody who I really look up to and honor his son and his service. And for me, it just meant a lot to be there.
Yeah, it was again, I'm so glad that you got out there and you got to be able to make that video. And I think you bring up some really great points about Jimmy Stewart's service and what he did right after he came back with that role in It's a Wonderful Life. And I really encourage people to go watch the video. It's a shorter one, 5 or 6 minutes, but I think it was just, I just really enjoyed kind of the points that you brought up. The silver screen shimmered a little less brightly for me in 1976. Gone were the days of feeding scripts to fresh-faced hopefuls. I'd now navigated a Hollywood landscape obsessed with sequels and explosions. Yet, here I was, back in familiar territory. John Wayne's office, of all places. Only this time, I wasn't a nervous junior executive seeking approval, but a seasoned advisor brought in for a specific purpose. Jimmy Stewart. The name still held a certain magic. The lanky youth I championed all those years ago had blossomed into a Hollywood legend. He was here for the shootist, a poignant reflection on aging gunslingers, a role that echoed his own on-screen persona. Time had etched lines on Jimmy's face, the boyish grin replaced by a seasoned smile, but his eyes still held that same spark of decency, the same twinkle that had captivated audiences for decades. We talked about the script, dissecting the character of J.B. Brooks, a fading marshal clinging to a bygone era.
I'm damn lucky you were around, Doc. That second one nearly did me in, coming out of nowhere like that.
There was a vulnerability in Jimmy's portrayal of the physician.
You must have the constitution of an ox.
Well, we'll see. That's what I'm here for.
Oh?
Who gives John Wayne's character the news no one wants to hear.
Books, every few days I have to tell a man or a woman something I don't want to. I've been practicing medicine for 29 years and I still don't know how to do it well.
A quiet acceptance of mortality that resonated deeply. It was a far cry from the wisecracking reporter of the Philadelphia Story or the idealistic heroes of his many films. Yet in a way, it felt like a culmination. Here was Jimmy, the embodiment of American virtue, confronting his own twilight. As we worked, I couldn't help but reminisce. I shared stories from his early days, the forgotten tests that launched his career. A hint of surprise actually flickered across his face, then a warm smile. Seems like a lifetime ago, he chuckled. That familiar drawl still holding its charm. Filming wrapped, and Jimmy's performance in The Shootist was a masterclass in understated brilliance. It wasn't the showstopper of his youth, but a quiet symphony of emotions. Watching him on screen, I didn't see a Hollywood legend, but the young man with a nervous twitch. The man who dared to dream big. The man who soared through the skies in a B-24. Jimmy Stewart's legacy transcended the silver screen. He was a testament to the enduring power of decency, a reminder that heroism comes in many forms, and for me, he would always be a bridge between the wide-eyed dreams of Hollywood's golden age and the bittersweet realities of time's passage. Thank you for listening to Talk with History podcast, and please reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com. But more importantly, if you know someone else that might enjoy this Jimmy Stewart-focused podcast, please share it with them. Shoot him a text and tell him to look us up. We rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.